Hello to all of my friends out there who are appearing for NEET. I'm really sorry for posting it late. I've been getting requests regarding to upload it continuously, but since I was busy, I couldn't. I'm sorry for that. So without any ado, let's start with we'll be starting with human physiology. Let's study things according to their importance and weightage of marks. So human physiology is really important, so we'll be starting with chapter 16th of human physiology, that is digestion and absorption. So here we go. Chapter 16, Digestion and Absorption. Food is one of the basic requirements of all living organisms. The major components of our food are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Vitamins and minerals are also required in small quantities. Food provides energy and organic materials for growth and repair of tissues. The water we take in plays an important role in the metabolic process and also prevents dehydration of the body. Big macromolecules in food cannot be utilized by our body into their original form. They have to be broken down and converted into simple substances in the digestive system. This process of conversion of complex food substances to simple absorbable form is called digestion, and it is carried out by digestive system by mechanical or biochemical methods. So we are moving on to the main part and we are starting the chapter digestive system. So our human digestive system consists of alimentary canal and associated gland. The alimentary canal begins with an anterior opening called the mouth and it opens out posteriorly through the anus. The mouth leads to an oral cavity or a buccal cavity. The oral cavity has a number of teeth and a muscular tongue. Each tooth is embedded in a socket of jawbone. This type of attachment is called thecodont. Majority of mammals, including human being, forms two sets of teeth during their life. A set of milk or deciduous teeth, which is replaced by a set of permanent or adult teeth. So this type of dentition is called diaphodont. In NEET, they might ask like which type of dentition do we have, so they'll be giving all kind of confusing options, but the answer is diaphodont. Always remember it is diaphodont. An adult human has 32 permanent teeth which are of four different types, that is heterodont dentition, namely incisors, canine, premolars and molar arrangement of teeth in each half of the upper and the lower jaw in the order ICPM, that is premolars and molars, is represented by the dental formula 2123 by 2123. The hard chewing surface of the teeth made up of enamel helps in the mastication of food. The tongue is freely movable muscular organ attached to the floor of the oral cavity by frenulum. The upper of the tongue has small projections called papillae, some of which bear taste buds. The oral cavity leads to a short pharynx which serves as a common passage for food and air. The esophagus and the trachea open into the pharynx. A cartilaginous flap called the epiglottis prevents the entry of food into the glottis. Glottis, which is the opening of the windpipe during swallowing. The esophagus is a thin, long tube which extends posteriorly, passing through the neck, thorax, and diaphragm, and leads to a J-shaped bag-like structure called the stomach. A muscular opening of the esophagus into the stomach is it regulates. So the regulation of the opening of esophagus into the stomach is done by a muscular sphincter, that is gastroesophageal sphincter. Now the stomach located in the upper left portion of the abdominal cavity has four major parts. That is a cardiac portion into which the esophagus opens, a fundic region, body means central region, and a pyloric portion, which opens into the first part of the small intestine. Small intestine is distinguishable into three regions: a C-shaped duodenum, a long coiled middle portion jejunum, and a highly coiled ileum. The opening of the stomach into the duodenum is guarded by the pyloric sphincter. Ileum opens into a large intestine. It consists of cecum, colon, and rectum. Cecum is a small blind sac which hosts some symbiotic microorganisms. A narrow finger-like tubular projection called the vermiform appendix, which is a vestigial organ, arises from the cecum. That is important. It is vestigial means they are actually till the present date their function is unknown. Moving on, the cecum opens into the colon. The colon is divided into four parts: ascending, descending, transverse, and a sigmoid colon. The descending part opens into the rectum, which opens out through the anus. The wall of the alimentary canal from the esophagus to the rectum possess 4 layers. Now this you need to learn it in order. That is serosa, muscularis, submucosa, and mucosa. Serosa is the outermost layer that is made up of a thin mesothelium, that is the epithelium of visceral organs, with some connective tissues. Muscularis is formed by smooth muscles usually arranged into an inner circular and an outer longitudinal layer. An oblique muscle layer may be present in some regions. The submucosal layer that is formed of loose connective tissue containing nerves, blood and lymph vessels. In duodenum, glands are also present in the submucosa. The innermost layer lining of the lumen of the alimentary canal is the mucosa. This layer forms irregular folds called rugae in the stomach and small finger-like foldings called the villi, in which the small intestine. The cells lining the villi produce numerous microscopic projections called microvilli, giving a brush border appearance. These modifications increase the surface area enormously. Villi, which is supplied with a network of capillaries and a large number of lymph vessels, are called lacteal. Mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secrete mucus that helps in the lubrication. Mucus also form glands in the stomach, gastric glands. Crypts in between the bases of villi is in the intestine is called the crypts of Lieberkühn. All the 4 layers show modifications in different parts of the alimentary canal. As you can see in the diagram, lacteal is actually a network of capillaries, so you need to understand it like that too. Now we are moving on to the second part of topic number 1, that is digestive gland. The digestive gland is associated with the alimentary canal, which includes salivary gland, liver and the pancreas. So totally 3 of them are there. Saliva is mainly produced by 3 pairs of salivary gland: the parotid, submaxillary and submandibular, and the sublingual, which is below the tongue. These glands are situated just outside the buccal cavity, which secretes salivary juice into the buccal cavity. So submaxillary or submandibular is located in the lower jaw, and the one which is below the tongue is the sublingual. Now, liver is the largest gland of the body, weighing about 1.2 to 1.5 kilogram in an adult human. It is situated in the abdominal cavity just below the diaphragm and has 2 lobes. The hepatic lobules are structural and functional units of liver containing hepatic cells, arranged in the form of cord. Each lobule is covered by a thin connective tissue sheath called the Glissen's capsule. The bile secreted by the hepatic cell passes through the hepatic duct and it is stored and concentrated in a thin muscular sac called the gallbladder. The duct of the gallbladder is called the cystic duct, which is along with the hepatic duct from the liver and forms a common bile duct. The bile duct and the pancreatic duct open together into the duodenum as a common hepatopancreatic duct, which is guarded by a sphincter called sphincter of Oddi. The pancreas is a compound, both exocrine and endocrine, elongated organ situated between the limbs of the C-shaped duodenum. The exocrine portion secretes an alkaline pancreatic juice containing enzymes, and the endocrine portion secretes hormones such as insulin and glucagon. Now we are moving on to the second topic, that is 16.2, digestion of food. The process of digestion is accomplished by mechanical and chemical process. The buccal cavity performs two major functions: mastification of food, facilitation of swallowing. The teeth and the tongue, with the help of saliva, masticate and mix up the food thoroughly. Mucus in the saliva helps in lubricating and adhering the masticated food particles into a bolus. The bolus is then conveyed into the pharynx, then into the esophagus by swallowing or deglutition. The bolus further passes down through the esophagus by successive waves of muscular contractions called peristalsis. The gastroesophageal sphincter controls the passage of food into the stomach. The saliva secreted into the oral cavity contains electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chlorine, and HCO3, and enzymes like salivary amylase and lysozyme. The chemical process of digestion is initiated in the oral cavity by the hydrolytic action of carbohydrate splitting enzyme. The salivary amylase, about 30% of the starch, is hydrolyzed here by this enzyme. Optimum pH is 6.8 into a disaccharide maltose. Lysozyme present in the saliva acts as an antibacterial agent that prevents infections. That is, starch, salivary amylase to maltose, pH will be 6.8. The mucus of the stomach has gastric glands. Gastric glands have three major types of cells, namely mucus cells, which secrete mucus, which also helps in the lubrication. Peptic cells, also known as chief cell, secrete proenzyme pepsinogen. Then the third one, parietal or oxyntic cells, which secrete HCl, which is the intrinsic factor essential for the absorption of vitamin B12. The stomach stores the food for 4 to 5 hours, and the food mixes thoroughly with the acidic gastric juice of the stomach by the churning movements of its muscular wall, and then the food is called the chyme. The proenzyme pepsinogen, which is secreted by the peptic or chief cells, on exposure to HCl, which is secreted by parietal or oxyntic cells of the stomach, gets converted into an active enzyme, which is pepsin. The proteolytic enzyme of the stomach, pepsin, converts proteins into proteases and peptones, which is a peptide. The mucus and the bicarbonates present in the gastric juice play an important role in the lubrication and protection of the mucosal epithelium from exoriation by the highly concentrated hydrochloric acid. HCl, the acidic pH, that is pH 1.8, optimal for pepsin. Renin is a proteolytic enzyme found in the gastric juice of infants, which helps in digestion of milk, proteins, etc. Small amounts of lipases are also secreted by gastric glands. Various types of movements are generated by muscularis layer of small intestine, and these movements help through mixing up of the food with various secretions in the intestine and thereby facilitate digestion. The bile, pancreatic juice and the intestinal juice are released into the small intestine. Pancreatic juice and bile are released through the hepatopancreatic duct. The pancreatic juice contains inactive enzyme like trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidases, amylases, lipases, and nucleases. This is very important. I repeat again, the pancreatic juice contains inactive enzymes like trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidases, amylases, lipases, and nucleases. Trypsinogen is activated by an enzyme enterokinase, which is secreted by the intestinal mucosa into active trypsin, which in turn activates the other enzymes in the pancreatic juice. The bile released into the duodenum contains the bile pigments like bilirubin and biliverdin, bile salt, cholesterol, and phospholipids, but no enzymes. Bile helps in emulsification of fat, breaking down of fats into very small micelles. Bile also activate lipases. The intestinal mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which secrete mucus, and the secretions of a brush border cells of mucosa along with the secretion of the goblet cells constitute the intestinal juice or succus entericus. The juice contains a variety of intestinal juice or disaccharides, which is a maltase, dipeptidases, lipases, nucleosidases, etc. The mucus along with the bicarbonates from the pancreas protect the intestinal mucosa from acid as well as provide an alkaline medium of pH 7.8 for enzymatic activities. Submucosal gland is also known as Brunner's gland, also help in this. Proteins, proteases and peptones are partially hydrolyzed proteins in the chyme, reaching the intestine, and they are acted upon by the proteolytic enzyme of pancreatic juice. And then you will be seeing a box, so I'll be just reading the description down below. Carbohydrates in the chyme are hydrolyzed by pancreatic amylase into disaccharides. Then comes fats are broken down by lipases with the help of bile into di and monoglycerides. Nucleases in the pancreatic juice acts on the nucleic acid to form nucleotides or nucleosides. The enzyme in the succus entericus act on the end products of the above reaction to form respective simple absorbable forms. The final step in digestion occur very close to the mucosal epithelium of the small intestine. The breakdown of biomacromolecules mentioned above occurs in the duodenum region of the small intestine. The simple substances thus formed are absorbed in the jejunum and ileum regions of the small intestine. The undigested and unabsorbed substances are passed on into the large intestine. No significant digestive activity occurs in the large intestine. The functions of the large intestine are absorption of water, minerals, and certain drugs. Secretion of mucus, which helps in adhering the waste, that is, which is undigested food particles together and lubricating them for easy passage. The undigested, unabsorbed substances called the feces enters into the caecum of the large intestine through the ileocaecal valve, which prevents the backflow of the large intestine of the fecal matter. It is temporarily stored in the rectum till defecation. The activities of the gastrointestinal tract are under neural and hormonal control for proper coordination of different parts. The sight, smell, or the presence of food in the oral cavity can stimulate the secretion of saliva. Gastric and intestinal secretions are also similarly stimulated by the neural signals. The muscular activities of different parts of the alimentary canal can also be moderated by neural mechanisms, both local through CNS. Hormonal control of the secretion of digestive juices is carried out by the local hormones produced by the gastric and intestinal mucosa. This paragraph is not much of an importance actually, so let's move on to topic number 3, that is absorption of digested products. Now, this is given in a summary that is in table 6.1. The summary of absorption in different parts of the digestive system, that is the only thing you can, it's very easy. So, in mouth, the mouth absorbs certain drugs which is coming in contact with the mucosa of the mouth and the lower side of the tongue, and it is absorbed into the blood capillaries lining them. In the stomach, absorption of water, simple sugars and alcohol takes place. You need to always remember that alcohol is only absorbed by stomach. And then the small intestine a principal organ for absorption is actually small intestine, where almost 70% of the food is being digested there, like fructose, fatty acids, etc., mucosa into the bloodstream and lymph. Large intestine is absorption of water, some minerals and drugs which takes place. Now another thing which is not mentioned here is actually fatty acids and glycerol are insoluble, as we all know. It cannot be absorbed by the blood. So first they are incorporated. Fatty acid and glycerol is incorporated into tiny small droplets which is called micelles, and they move into the intestinal mucosa and they are reformed into small protein coated fat globules called chylomicrons. So which is transported into the lymph vessels, which is lacteal. Now lacteal is a group of. Now we are moving on to the disorders of digestive system. And before that, I'm very sorry, forgot to mention that the absorbed substances finally reach the tissues which utilize them for their activities. And now this process is called assimilation. Now moving on to the very last topic, that is disorders of digestive system. Inflammation of intestinal tract is the most common ailment due to bacterial or viral infections. The infections are also caused by the parasites of the intestine like tapeworm, roundworm, hookworm, threadworm, etc. Jaundice is the very first disease which is affected by the liver. Skin, eyes turn yellow as a result due to the deposit of bile pigments. Now, which are the bile pigments? Bilirubin and biliverdin. Vomiting. Vomiting is actually the ejection of the stomach contents through the mouth. This reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in the medulla. A feeling of nausea precedes vomiting. Diarrhea is the abnormal frequency of bowel movement and increased liquidity of the fecal discharge is known as diarrhea. It reduces the absorption of food. Constipation. In the constipation, the feces are retained within the colon as the bowel movements occur regularly. Indigestion is the condition where food is not properly digested, leading to feeling of fullness or a fatigue. And the causes of indigestion are inadequate enzyme secretion, may be anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, or spicy food. Now we're moving on to PEM, that is protein and energy malnutrition. So dietary deficiency of proteins and total food calories are widespread in many underdeveloped countries of South and Southeast of Asia, South America and Western Central Africa. Protein energy malnutrition may affect a large sections of population during drought, famine and political turmoil. This happened in Bangladesh during the liberation of war in Ethiopia during the severe drought in mid-80s. Now, protein energy malnutrition affects infants and children to produce marasmus and kwashiorkor. So, marasmus is the first one, which is produced by simultaneous deficiency of proteins and calories, and marasmus is the only one which happens in infants less than 1. When it comes to kwashiorkor, it is actually produced by protein deficiency unaccompanied by calorie deficiency. Now, the symptoms of marasmus is actually growth rate and the body weight will decline and the skin becomes dry, thin, wrinkled. Even growth and development of the brain, mental facilities, all are impaired. When it comes to kwashiorkor, it results in extensive edema, swelling of the body parts, failure of growth and brain development, etc. Now that is the end of this chapter, and we have successfully finished digestive system and absorption, which is a very important chapter in this entire human physiology too at the same time. So thank you so much and stay tuned for the next one. Until then, God bless you all.